Working with clients, a practical guide to anti-money laundering requirements. Knowing your client is one of the most important obligations you have as a real estate professional. By knowing your client and identifying any potential red flags, you can help prevent, deter, and detect money laundering and terrorist financing activity in our province. Changes to the Proceeds of Crime, Money Laundering, and Terrorist Financing Act, otherwise known as PCM-LTFA, are coming into effect. These changes introduce additional obligations for the real estate industry and are intended to strengthen Canada's anti-money laundering regime. It will be important for you to understand what these changes are and how they may impact your business. As part of your Know Your Client responsibilities under PCM-LTFA, you must ensure that the information your client provides you with corresponds with their identification documents and other information sources like BC's new Landowner Transparency Registry, land title records, and the corporate registry where appropriate. Your clients may have questions about your obligations and may need to better understand why you're making requests for information. We know that building trust is essential to a successful relationship with a client. How you present these federally legislated obligations to your client matters. By speaking about your duties clearly and professionally, and by addressing your client's concern, you'll be able to have a better working relationship with your client. It always helps to be prepared. To assist you with explaining your federal anti-money laundering obligations, we'll walk through a typical client interaction. In our example, Alice and Jacob are potential buyer clients.
Omar, a real estate professional, was contacted by Alice and Jacob. They wanted him to represent them in the purchase of a new property. After discussing the terms of their relationship, Alice and Jacob have agreed to enter into a buyer's agency agreement with Omar. We're excited to start looking for new properties. Could we schedule some viewings for tomorrow?
Can Omar start showing properties to Alice and Jacob? It's best to take steps to know your client first. Federal legislation requires you to verify the identity of your clients. To help you fulfill these requirements, we recommend that you start taking steps to identify your buyer client once you enter into a buyer's agency agreement. Or, if no formal agreement is entered into, you should identify your buyer client before writing an offer. What do these identification steps look like? Identifying your client should include, number one, obtaining government-issued photo identification documents. Number two, performing a search of the Landowner Transparency Registry. And number three, searching the corporate registry if your client is a corporation. You should refer to FINTRAC's Know Your Client requirements for more information.
Omar explains that he'd be happy to show Alice and Jacob around the properties of interest. Before we get started, I need to get to know you and understand more about your needs. I'd also like to talk to you about the obligations I have as a real estate professional with respect to anti-money laundering. Here's a form that I need to review with you. Let's start by getting your government-issued photo ID, and we can go through the form together. Don't worry, I know this is sensitive information, and it's kept confidential unless I'm required to provide it to the federal regulator. Alice and Jacob provide their ID. Omar and Alice continue to discuss the needs for their new property. Great, thanks so much, Alice and Jacob. Now let me ask you, other than your current home, do either of you own any other property in BC or have any indirect interests in property in BC? Alice replies that they just own a property in Chilliwack and asks, what do you mean by indirect interest? When I say indirect interests, I mean, do you have any indirect ownership of land through any shareholdings in a corporation, partnership interests, in a partnership or beneficial interests as a trust beneficiary? Alice nods in understanding and says, no, we do not have any indirect interest in property in BC. Omar continues to explain to Alice and Jacob that federal and provincial governments have been taking greater action to improve anti-money laundering efforts and address the public's concerns with its wide-ranging impacts, including inflated housing prices. The real estate industry is committed to doing their part to combat money laundering in BC. The regulator of real estate services in BC has issued anti-money laundering guidelines, which he needs to follow. In addition to gathering the information that he's just received, he will be searching the Landowner Transparency Registry. The registry is a public registry, and it contains information about individuals that have an indirect interest in land. I can provide you a link to the information that my regulator has published on this so that you can understand why I need to do this. Essentially, it comes down to the federal Know Your Client requirements. Do you have any questions for me?
Let's review how Omar prepared his clients to help him fulfill his identification requirements. In this interaction with his clients, Omar explains his anti-money laundering obligations. It's important that clients understand why they need to provide you with information, and they will want to know the reasoning behind your searches. Omar maintains trust in the real estate industry by reiterating the industry's commitment to preventing and deterring money laundering. He's careful to mention that his actions are all a part of the government's efforts to combat crime. When talking to your client, be sure to describe BC's new Landowner Transparency Registry, just as Omar did. Be clear with your client that our recommendation to run a name search is a way of verifying and confirming any indirect interest in land. Notice in Omar's case that he offers to show his clients our guidelines. Always provide additional resources to your client as they may have questions later. Explain that the ultimate reason for this type of search is because you are required to know your client. Talk to your client using some of the same language contained in your supporting materials. Avoid using industry acronyms such as LOADER and AML. These practices will help you build trust and professionalism. In this example, Omar specifically asked his clients if they had any indirect interest in land. Omar provides an explanation of what this term means. You should assume most clients will not understand what an indirect interest is. When clients understand your anti-money laundering obligations and why you may be asking them about their indirect ownership of any BC property, your clients will be more comfortable with your request for information.
Jacob is wondering why the search is necessary. This seems like a lot. Why do you have to collect and verify all this information? We just want to get on with buying our new house. I understand your question. My regulator advises me to complete the search. With this registry, I need to do my due diligence to know my client and gather information where available from sources like the registry. It's very similar to performing a title search if, for example, you were selling your home. In such a scenario, I would do a title search to verify that you are the registered owner and have the authority to sell the property. In this case, where you are buying, I'm searching the Landowner Transparency Registry to see if you have any indirect interests in land in order to get a broader picture of my clients. The fact that real estate professionals undertake this due diligence is in itself a potential deterrent to those individuals who may be trying to launder money.
Let's talk about what could help alleviate the client's concerns. Omar's clients are still uncomfortable with providing this information. He reiterates that he's collecting the information in accordance with the best practice outlined by the regulator. Omar is clear that he's doing this search not because he does not trust his clients, but because it's part of his due diligence in the context of AML. Omar lets his clients know that these requests are quite regular, and he compares the search to the standard practice of performing a title search. Real estate professionals trust that their seller clients own the property they are trying to sell, but they search for title as part of their due diligence activities.
Okay, sure, that makes sense. Maybe you should email me the link to the guidance so that I can look into it later. Great, I will absolutely do that. I know, it's a lot to absorb. I will go ahead with my routine search in the Landowner Transparency Registry. Omar's search of Alice shows 3 results showing property located in Vancouver. Omar's search of Jacob has no results.
What should Omar do with the information provided by his clients? Registered interests in land, such as Alice and Jacob's property located in Chilliwack, are not captured in the LOADER database, so it would be normal for most individuals to not show up in the results of a search. The Landowner Transparency Registry only shows indirect interests in land. If your client's name appears in the results, you should initiate a discussion about what you found.
Okay, Alice, so I've done a search on both you and Jacob. Nothing shows up under Jacob's name, but the database shows that a name matching yours has indirect interests in 3 properties in Vancouver. Might any of these interests relate to you? Nope, I don't have any interest in land in BC. Just this property in Chilliwack. Maybe the results you got were for someone with the same name. Okay, not a problem. Thanks for confirming.
What should Omar do next? Omar will need to make an assessment of the facts, the context, and any money laundering indicators to determine whether there are reasonable grounds to suspect that the transaction is linked to money laundering. In this particular case, there are no other indicators that would lead Omar to suspect that Alice is not being truthful. Because of this, a suspicious transaction report does not need to be filed at this time. Omar should, however, remain vigilant throughout the course of the transaction in case contextual patterns or client behavior begin to indicate irregularities in the information being provided by his clients. Omar and his brokerage should also be alert to any information coming to light in the future, as the single transaction will have created a business relationship which requires monitoring.
After his discussion with Alice and Jacob regarding the landowner transparency registry results, Omar begins to show property to Alice and Jacob. They eventually find a property they like and want to put in an offer. Omar works to write up an offer and provides it to the seller's real estate professional.
Does Omar need to search the registry for information about the sellers or their property? No, Omar does not need to search the registry unless he is instructed to do so by Alice and Jacob. This is because the sellers are represented by another real estate professional. The real estate professional representing the sellers should have already searched the registry and the property as part of their Know Your Client obligations. If the sellers were unrepresented, Omar would have to work to identify the sellers as if they were his clients. Like any client conversation, take a moment to prepare what you will say about your anti-money laundering duties to clients and be ready to address their concerns. Visualizing the interaction with your clients and having the proper guidance materials available will make the conversation with your clients a smooth experience. You should make this part of your routine to inspire trust with all of your clients and help build the professional reputation of the real estate industry. If you need more information and guidance on your anti-money laundering duties, please review FINTRAC's guidelines and our regulatory information and guidelines. You can also contact our professional standards advisors with any questions.